Beneath the endless blue breadth of the Atlantic, where light fades into cold whispers and time drifts without a name, there are stories carved into stone, metal, and silence. Some say the ocean forgets everything, but the truth is simpler and far more haunting. The Atlantic remembers. It remembers civilizations that rose like sparks and fell like shadows. It remembers the footsteps that once crossed lands now swallowed by water. And it remembers the secrets we have been too afraid to face. Secrets resting in the dark, waiting for the moment when the world becomes quiet enough to hear them again. The Atlantic greets us with a breath of cold air, a whisper rolling across the surface like an ancient message carried too far from home. At first glance, the ocean appears calm, almost gentle, painted in soft strokes of blue and gray that shimmer under a reluctant morning sun. But this stillness is a mask, a thin veil stretched across something far older and far more deliberate. Every wave is a heartbeat. Every ripple is a memory rising to the surface before sinking again, lost to the pull of deeper currents. And as we approach the narrow threshold where sky dissolves into sea, it becomes clear that we are standing on the edge of a story the world has long forgotten. The descent begins slowly, as if the ocean itself must learn to trust our presence. The first layers of water curl around the vessel in sheets of pale turquoise, bright enough to give the illusion of safety. But with every meter downward, the light fractures into darker tones: cobalt, midnight blue, and finally, the near black of a realm untouched by sunlight. Here, sound travels differently, pulsing in long, hollow trails that vanish into empty corridors of pressure and silence. It feels less like entering an ecosystem and more like stepping into a memory that does not belong to us. The instruments crackle softly, struggling against the density of the water. Lines on the radar screen flicker like hesitant thoughts, and then, through the static, the first outline begins to form, a shape too straight to be natural, too deliberate to be chance. At this depth, nature rarely draws in lines. Yet here, beneath the crushing weight of the Atlantic, a structure reveals itself in the shadows, a vertical rise of stone that seems to claw upward, as if reaching for a sun it has not seen in 10,000 years. A shiver runs through the cabin, not from fear but from recognition. We have seen ruins before, scattered across continents and buried beneath deserts, but the ocean has never given us something like this. Something that feels less like a ruin and more like a survivor. As we drift closer, the water thickens with suspended particles, each one a tiny fragment of time. They swirl around the structure like drifting stars, illuminating edges that should not exist this deep. Carvings etched along the stone catch the faint glow of our lights, revealing patterns that curve like tides but strike with human precision. Spirals, intersecting lines and symbols resembling constellations, all arranged with the intention of guiding whoever once stood here. Whoever once looked at these markings may have been reading a map, a story, or a warning. The deeper we descend, the more the ocean begins to change. The temperature drops sharply, slicing through the hull with the kind of cold that feels personal, almost aware. The currents shift as if responding to our intrusion, swirling in slow, deliberate motions that create the unsettling sense that the Atlantic is watching. And perhaps it is. For thousands of years, these relics have rested untouched, guarded by pressure and darkness. Now, with our lights intruding on their slumber, the water responds like a living thing, testing us, weighing our intent. The stone wall turns into a corridor. Narrow, angular, impossibly symmetrical. No natural force could have carved this. The seafloor around it slopes downward, forming a basin that resembles a collapsed plaza. Scattered fragments of pillars rise from the sand, each one bleached by salt and time, yet still standing with a resilience that feels almost defiant. The city, if it can be called that, is broken, but not erased. It holds its shape like a ghost refusing to fade. A thick cloud of sediment drifts past, stirred by a distant tremor. The sound arrives a heartbeat later, a deep, resonant thud that vibrates through the hull. Something moved. Whether it was the shifting earth or the restless breath of the ocean itself, we cannot yet tell. But the tremor leaves behind a question that hangs in the silence. If this place has slept for millennia, what stirred it now? As the lights sweep across the plaza, a central structure comes into view. It rises from the seafloor with the dignity of a monument built not to impress, but to endure. The edges are worn, the carvings softened by time, yet the architecture is unmistakably intentional. A circular platform lies at its base, covered in symbols arranged like the spokes of an ancient wheel. In the center a single pillar leans slightly, cracked but unbroken, and carved along its surface, half hidden by marine growth, are markings that seem to form a sentence. A sentence written in a language older than the names we give the oceans. The water around us thickens again, humming with a low rhythmic vibration. It is faint, almost imperceptible, but it pulses in a familiar pattern, like a heartbeat echoing from within the stone. The more we listen, the more the vibration aligns with our thoughts, settling into a rhythm that feels intentional, like a call or a memory awakening. We have found the first relic of the forgotten world, but it is not silent, and as the Atlantic draws us deeper, the truth becomes clear. This civilization was not merely lost to the ocean. It may have been claimed by something that still lingers here, woven into the water, waiting for someone to hear its voice again. The ocean tightens around us as we push deeper into the plaza, as though the Atlantic itself is drawing a cold breath and holding it. Darkness settles like a curtain, swallowing the last traces of surface light until only the vessel's beams remain. Thin, trembling lines suspended in a void that feels older than the concept of time itself. Yet within this vast emptiness, the ruins continue to rise, piece by piece, like fragments of a dream returning to clarity. And with every meter forward, an unspoken truth grows heavier in the water. This civilization was not washed away. It was sunk with purpose. A drift of silt rolls across the seabed as the current shifts. The visibility warps, blurring the edges of stone pillars into ghostly silhouettes. When the haze clears, the carvings on the central monument stand out in sharper relief, illuminated in pale arcs of artificial light. The symbols spiral outward from the pillar like a star map etched with intention, each line curving into the next, with a rhythm that feels almost alive. It is as if the stone itself is speaking, not in words, but in patterns, echoing a language built from the tides. The hum we felt earlier returns, this time stronger. It vibrates through the metal of the vessel, through the lights, through the water. A pulse, slow, measured, repeating. We lean in closer, listening to the deep, resonant beat that seems to come from within the ruins themselves. It is not mechanical. There is no clang of gears, no metallic signature. Instead, it feels organic, like the deep voice of the sea vibrating through living stone. As the frequency steadies, the carvings along the pillar begin to shimmer faintly, their grooves catching scattered bioluminescent particles drifting through the water. Something about this place is responding to our presence. The realization settles with a weight that cannot be ignored. Civilizations are built with intention, but ruins should be still, silent, and at rest. Yet here, beneath unimaginable pressure and darkness, the architecture feels charged with a quiet awareness, as though waiting for a sign it has finally received. The vessel's lights sweep across the perimeter of the plaza, revealing more structures buried in sand and coral. Steps carved into stone descend into narrow corridors. Walls tilt inward, forming passages that resemble channels once used for water or light. Some of the surfaces are covered in patterns that look like sundials or tidal charts, but twisted into designs that do not match any known civilization. These people, whoever they were, observed the ocean with an intimacy far beyond our understanding. It was not a boundary to them. It was a partner, a guide, a force to be listened to. Another tremor rolls through the seafloor. This one is small, almost hesitant, but powerful enough to send a fresh cloud of sediment spiraling upward. The hum beneath us flutters, shifting pitch as if reacting. We steady the vessel, recalibrating the lights, but before the brightness returns, something moves in the darkness to our right. A flicker, a ripple, a shadow passing between pillars. It vanishes as quickly as it appeared, leaving behind only turbulence in the water. Was it the current? A large fish? Or something drawn to the ruins the same way we are? The question lingers like a held breath as we move toward a collapsed archway. Beneath the fallen stones lies an expansive chamber carved into the seabed, its entrance framed by pillars wrapped in coral like ancient bones dressed in sea life. The chamber opens into a wide, circular space that feels impossibly precise. Ridges run along the floor in perfect alignment, forming concentric patterns that converge at a point in the center. A depression filled with smooth, dark sand untouched by currents. It looks ceremonial, deliberate. A meeting place, a chamber of knowledge or worship. As the lights sweep across the far wall, they reveal a massive mural carved into the stone. The scene shows waves rising and falling in long, sweeping arcs, but among them are shapes resembling continents, coastlines, and cities. Some carvings show the land submerged. Others curl into spirals, suggesting collapse or transformation. And at the center of the mural is a symbol repeated again and again. A circle divided by a single diagonal line, intersected by 3 smaller marks. It appears on pillars, on the floor, even on the broken fragments scattered through the ruins. This symbol meant something to them, something important enough to carve into nearly every surface. The hum grows louder, not violently but steadily, as if the frequency is aligning with something in the chamber. The lights flicker. Small particles drifting in the water begin to orbit the central depression, moving in slow, synchronized loops that ignore the natural flow of current. It is a pattern, purposeful, mathematical, rhythmic. And as the motion intensifies, a faint glow begins to rise from the sand, spreading through the water like a breath of pale blue fire. The ocean holds its silence as the glow intensifies, illuminating the chamber in a soft, ghostly light. And in that moment, the truth becomes undeniable. This place was engineered, not only with stone and knowledge, but with energy. Energy that somehow survived millennia beneath crushing pressure. Energy that is still active. The hum stabilizes into a single, steady vibration that resonates through the hull, through the ruins, through the water itself. It feels like a message, ancient, deliberate, and waiting for someone to finally hear it. And we realize, with a chill sharper than the cold around us, that we are not the first to uncover this relic, but we may be the first in thousands of years to awaken it. The chamber brightens, the sand stirs, and the glow begins to take shape. Something beneath this ocean has just begun to respond. It is calling, and the Atlantic is no longer silent.